Welcome. At this time, we go live to the Vatican City as we see in live images that there's black smoke coming up from the chimney that comes from the Sistine Chapel. This black smoke follows the first voting in the process of the conclave that has started today, this Wednesday. Let's remember that the first day of the conclave started with the cardinals attending an initial mass, then heading to the Sistine Chapel where the first voting took place. The voting takes place by each cardinal, each one of the 133 cardinals voting for their elected Pope candidate. And if that voting is not conclusive, that means that the Pope has not been elected. Let's recall that for a Pope to be elected, it has to obtain at least 2/3 of the 133 votes. Those votes, after being counted, are then burned, and with the smoke from those burning ballots coming up in a black smoke, as we are seeing, that is the world in which this conclave is announcing to the world that this voting has been inconclusive. There has not been a Pope elected just yet, and this means that the process continues on a second day of election that will start tomorrow. What happens at this moment after the second day of the conclave? There will be 4 instances of election every day, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. After each election, we will see smoke coming up of the Sistine Chapel, as we are seeing right now in these live images. And again, black smoke will indicate if the voting did not conclude on a new pope, and white smoke will only be the case if a pope has been elected. So the process continues. We will continue to tune in to the Sistine Chapel tomorrow and the days to come. Let's remember that this process has no final date. It will continue until the Pope, the next leader of the Catholic Church that will succeed late Pope Francis, is finally elected. There are several procedures that also account for example, the cardinals being able to take 1 day for reflection if after several days of voting a conclusive decision is not reached. But in this case, we are looking ahead at least 1 day of voting tomorrow, in which we will have the 4 instances. Let's recall that we are looking at the images, live images from the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican City. The whole world is looking at this chimney at the moment that announces that the first voting at the Vatican has been inconclusive. So the cardinals continue to deliberate, will continue to hold conversations in secrecy. They will not have any sort of contact with the exterior along this entire process. This is something that is implemented so that there is no external interference. And we also need to say that it was mostly expected that this first voting was inconclusive, with black smoke coming out of the chimney as we are seeing right now. The first vote tends to be ceremonial, and it's very hard for one single candidate to obtain the absolute majority. That means the 2/3 required to be elected Pope. Let's recall that the Pope may be elected out of all the 133 cardinal electors that are participating in this conclave. For that, they need to obtain an absolute majority at one of the votes. And this process continues with each voting every day. We said that we would have 4 voting instances as of tomorrow with the same procedure. The voting is completely secret. as we were saying, the ballots are burned after every voting instance, so there is no information regarding the results of the previous votings. And as the days continue in each conclave, different candidates may go up and down in different tendencies as the cardinals see which may gather the necessary support to become the leader of the church. Let's recall that even though the conclave is starting today, Wednesday, the meetings among the cardinals have begun from the very moment the last pope, late Pope Francis, passed away. Those are preliminary meetings in which not only ceremonial issues are discussed and debated, such as the beginning of the conclave itself, but also general discussions regarding the general challenges that the church is facing at this moment, also the different perspectives on where the church should go, what decisions are going to have to be made by the upcoming pope. And during these meetings, the cardinals that start arriving at the Vatican City start getting to know each other, also getting to know their own positions. And in this process, it's that several of them start gaining favors and possibilities of maybe becoming the next pope. This was the case of Pope Francis, that many accounts say that in those meetings prior to the last conclave that ended finally with his election, he exposed his visions on the challenges that the church was facing, and also his visions for the needs for the church to reform facing the people and to face different reforms that acknowledged the needs of the most humble of the world. Those visions that were presented by Pope Francis on those meetings before the conclave, the last conclave started, were the meetings and the visions that really positioned him among the view of his fellow cardinals for them to finally end up picking Pope Francis, our last pope, that was also the first Latin American pope to lead the church for the past 12 years. That was in year 2013. And right now we are at the first voting day of a new conclave, the first vote of the day and the only vote of this first day has been inconclusive. We were seeing images of the black smoke coming out of the Sistine Chapel, indicating that no pope has been elected so far, as was also expected, being it the only vote so far. The process continues tomorrow, and we were saying that Pope Francis was the first Latin American pope, and there are also several candidates, and experts are pointing out to the possibility of maybe the next pope also being not from the central regions of the world, being Europe, for example, as was tradition for decades, but maybe we could be looking at the possibility of a pope that comes from, for example, the Asian region, where the Catholic Church has grown significantly during the past years. That idea of maybe bringing a new pope that comes from the peripheries and also from an outside perspective, as Pope Francis did at the time, is one of the things that the experts are looking into. The possibility of continuity with Pope Francis' traditions and his reforms, or maybe a pope that comes from another sector of the church. That is what is being debated right now at the Vatican City. Today, we have no new pope elected, but the conclave continues. We were looking at images, live images from the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican City. No pope has been elected so far. There was black smoke, but we will continue to follow this 2025 conclave in the upcoming days and bring you the latest news. Stay tuned with teleSUR English.